Now, the reason these are so valuable today, why these sell for darn good money all the time, is that they weren't meant to last. Once you use these, they were meant to be thrown away. They were cheaply made to begin with. Hey, it's Don. Today we're going to look at some items here that weren't meant to ever be kept. These were meant to be used at specific events and campaigns. These are campaign-tied ribbons, and we'll show you some close-ups here of just a few of the nice ones that we run into here, just to give you an idea. And then we're going to look at the values of some of these. Some of these types of ribbons can go for $2, $3, $4, $5, even $10,000 if you find the right one. Now, these are early from the 1880s and 1890s, but even ones from, say, JFK, John F. Kennedy, can sell for thousands of dollars. These kind of go along the lines of campaign buttons and pins. Sometimes the campaign buttons and pins would have a ribbon hanging off the bottom of it as well. So you can run into a ribbon and a pin, or just a ribbon. Many times the ribbons were the ones that were given away, and the pins themselves sometimes you may have had to buy. But this is a typical example of a silk ribbon from the 1890s or so. Now, some ribbons also have this metallic thread on the bottom of them, tassels, I guess you would say. Now, again, some of these were issued just like this. Some would have a button up at the top with like a slogan or something else. It might advance the notion of what you see on here. Now, there is a little bit of damage to this one. It's to be expected. This weighs a lot at the bottom. Once the structure of the silk goes and starts to break down, it can split. I usually like to sell these as quickly as I can get them in so they can't deteriorate anymore in my possession. When I ship these as well too, or at least when I store these, I should say, these are carefully wrapped and usually backed, and they're tightly sealed in there so that the silk itself isn't going to move around, so it won't split or damage any more than it already is. You've got to be really careful with these. I seal each one after they're photoed or scanned. Now, these I would scan for sure, without a doubt. Scanning is the best, safest way to portray these how they actually are. Now, I've got a whole bunch of these. I usually buy ribbons. I get them, I don't know, maybe half a dozen, maybe 10 times a year at best. Now, these early ones, you have to hunt really hard to find stuff like this, but they do show up. There are some out there. This is Yates, Illinois' Republican Club. It's a nice one. You can see it does have some issues. There's a little hole in it, but that's typical from something that was made of silk and made to be thrown away after the campaign from the 1880s, 1890s. Republican watcher. Now, this would be a pole watcher, and this is cloth. It's got a red, white, and blue patriotic ribbon design. Very unique one here. Now, these run, technically, these are running vertical. At least they should be, like the first one I showed you, but this one is printed horizontal, so these pins would go on a little different. This is just to say, hey, this is the Republican watcher. Stuart City Republican Club. This is Stuart, Michigan, I believe, but I could be wrong. There are some from Illinois in this lot. Delegate 13th Ward Republican Convention. Now, you could go and look that date up. These may all be from the same time frame, but I do believe there's a couple different eras that I acquired. Sometimes I run into hundreds of these, in all honesty. Maybe they were in a family book stuffed in there and things like that. These are in really nice condition. This one has a wood grain pattern to it. Very unique, very nice, excellent condition. I believe this was a campaign to move the capital from Lansing, Michigan, when it burned in 1870s. If I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong on that. Maybe there's something else going on here that I'm just unaware of. But these are still pretty nice. You could probably track these down as to what it's for online. Now, here's Logan Republican Club. Now, I don't remember if he was the presidential or vice presidential candidate, but he ran for public office, obviously, 13th Ward, Chicago, and this is a club that was tied to him. They had him here in Ohio, too. There's actually a Logan, Ohio, I do believe is named after him. The Marquette Club. It's got a few threads that are off right there, as you can see. I don't want to mess them up any worse than they are. Vice President. I'm sure this is tied to some sort of political campaign as well. And then Minneapolis, formerly Illinois, which is rather interesting. Kind of an oddball one, to say the least. But this is just a few examples of what I look for, what you could run into. Let's hop over to eBay and let's show you some of the values, massive values, some of these can sell for. Now we're in my eBay account here. I'm in the hub in Terapeak. We're in the research section of Terapeak. And I've just typed in campaign ribbon. That is it. Now, you're going to run into other ribbons, such as like silk ribbons that may have been issued for commemorations, like of Queen Elizabeth or Queen Victoria or something along that line. They go way back. Ribbons have been around since well before the colonial time. They've been a way to tell everybody that you're for a certain thing, a certain group, a certain campaign, or anything along that line. Very, very common items that they still do make some of today. Now, obviously, the older, the better, usually in these sorts of things, or if they're tied to something very specific. This first one here is a Civil War campaign medal with the ribbon. It's numbered. This would have been given to somebody who was in a military campaign during the Civil War for their service during the war. One from presidential campaigns are extremely popular. This one's from James Polk. Very early, 1844, $1,100. Top one, $2,500. So if you spend just a little bit of time, you're going to see some horrendous prices. A Lincoln and Hamlin political campaign ribbon, $1,000. It's not the most expensive, as someone may actually assume. And as I said, there are JFK. Here's a John F. Kennedy political campaign pinback button, ribbon badge, I guess you would say, all in one. It might say delegate or something like that. It's $700. And that, again, isn't the highest. I've seen some of the JFK sell into the $1,000 range. Here's another one that looks very similar to the JFK, and this one's from Roosevelt from 1904. So if you spend just a little bit of time, and we're going to open up just a few so you can get some ideas on description and things along that line. But there is some horrendous value in these. Every one doesn't sell for a ton of money. In some cases, there are some reproductions on some of these. So you got to be a little careful on here. The newer ones are where you usually run into the most amount of reproductions. Ones with photographic pins of, say, Roosevelt, like this one up here, Harrison campaign pin, ribbon, button. Those usually do fairly well. The ones I showed you should at least get me $20, I would say, on any given day, all the way up to a few hundred if they're scarce enough. Now, with the books and such forth that you'll run into in ribbons and things like that, there's just so many of them that it's really hard to see them all in one single book. There's sites online, and there's new ribbons and campaign items showing up daily, it seems like some days. Things that I've never seen or do not show up in books turn up fairly often, at least from my personal experience of messing with these. There are some reliable ones that everybody wants. In fact, let's open up one of these Lincoln ones here just to give you an idea. So here is one from Colonel John C. Fremont, and this is his political campaign, 1856. And you can see it's the same basic thing that I showed you. Now, these from this time frame were far more delicate silk. They were thinner. They're not quite what you see in the modern day ones. Not all of them, but the majority of the ones I see, the earlier they are, the thinner, the finely done they are, the more finely done. So the silk will be really nice and tightly woven. Free speech, free men, free Kansas. Stand for the right. Free men, remember. 1856. So this is an interesting one for sure. $518 for this one. Now, where would you find some of these? Obviously, antique auctions are good. Estate sales are great. Book sales, believe it or not, many times I run into ribbons in books. Older book, obviously, for something like this, but they use them for bookmarks. So that's why I do turn up quite a few of these. More ribbons in general turn up for me looking through old books than turn up in other areas, other than finding like one whole collection from somebody. Now, here's another one for William McKinley from 1896. Now, just the ribbon there that says sound money, sometimes ribbons just like that for another campaign slogan can go for $50, $60. You just have to understand what the ribbon goes to, where it's from. So this is the Sound Money Club, Chicago Day, 1896. The Rookery Nonpartisan, I don't know if that's some newspaper. And again, Sound Money with a political campaign button at the top. You can see, too, the pin sticks out past the button. That's usually a sign that it's an earlier one, but not always. there was a law passed that the pin had to stick inside the button so no one would get stabbed with a pin or anything else like that. Looking at the cracking on the top, this could be a celluloid button as well. But again, it's the same basic slogan, sound money. And then again, sound money, Lebanon, Pennsylvania. So some of these would be issued just for specific cities even. So when he was going on his campaign tour, every city he stopped in, you could find ribbons or buttons or something campaign-wise tied to that specific location. These are basically $25 a piece if you figured it out there, $25, $30 by the time you take off shipping and things like that. Nice assortment. Again, wrap them up, seal them up carefully right away after you scan them. And I would say these were scanned, which is the best way to do these. Now here is a Abraham Lincoln one. Now this one's in really worn, dirty condition. It looks like it was stained at one time. Now I'm not sure if they just have a bad photo, but that's really not a great display for this item. It should be a little clearer. Now one thing to notice too is they have a UV light image of this. With the UV light, if it shines or turns white, it's pretty much modern every single time. That goes for paper as well. I have a UV light we use, so if I ever want to know if something's modern, like 95, 96, 97% of the time, a UV light will blast out anything that's modern because of the construction, the type of paper it is, or the type of cloth it is. The UV light is probably one of the best routes to go for telling the authenticity on some of the vintage stuff. There are, say, like modern day postcards that are made to look just like the vintage one. Even some of the postcards we do, I use vintage style backs, or at least vintage style designs for the backs, just because I like the style in ours too. But again, the UV light, ultraviolet light, will pretty much shout out with a big white glare if it's basically modern day stuff. But anyway, that's just a touch on this. There's tens of thousands of different ribbons out there for all sorts of events. I am just showing you campaign ribbons, but I've sold reunion ribbons, city ribbons, centennial ribbons, tricentennial, anything for any historical event or town or city or activity usually can carry a value such as these here. Well, there we have it. Hopefully that gave you some ideas, some thoughts. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button down below. You can also hit the bell icon to be notified if I post new content or go live. Subscribe and tell all your friends.
When can I pick up the pictures?
Thursday.
Thursday, okay, let me make a note of that.
You gonna write it down there?
Oh, well, it's going to, yeah.
Well, then let's say Tuesday.
You mean 2 days earlier?
No, 5 days later.
5 days later, I thought as much.
If this customer were at a Photomat store, we'd be introducing him to our brand new picture pickup promise. Photomat's way of telling you exactly when your pictures will be ready.
That quick?
Sure, and if it doesn't work out, you get a free roll of film.
Oh, no. You get in trouble for
It's
that.
no problem.
Huh?
It's a Photomat policy.
The Photomat picture pickup promise.
Is there a Photoman store around here?